and I live in Sacramento, and I see that there's other people from Sacramento, so hello neighbors. Yeah, that's the basics about me, and I'll be talking probably a little bit more about me today, given the nature of our conversation.
Awesome. So this is a question that Tian from Friday, she was our guest on Friday, that she did, that I always want to ask and I always forget, and she did it, and I was like, oh, I have to remember. So I remembered. So in the chat, if you could please write what brought you here today and what you're hoping to get out of this. So you could say, I was inspired to join, because of this, or I was hoping to contribute this, or I was curious about this. So if you could just put that in the chat, we would love to know what brought you here today. Public health hours for a nurse certification program. Hi, Ian. I'm the friend that invited Ian. I want to expand my sense of cultural humility and better serve those in the community. Just curious about the topic. School nurse certification, the topic. Okay, so a lot of people who are curious. I wanted to gather ideas and thoughts. Cool. A committee, Resilient Columbus. Interesting. Okay, cool. Great. Thank you. And if you still have yours and you want to type it in there, we would love to hear what brought you here today. So what we'll do is we're going to present for a couple minutes. We have a few clips for you to watch. And then we're going to share a little bit about some of our ideas, things that we may have been thinking about that inspired us to have this conversation today. And then we'll go ahead and open it up. And we want to hear from like as many of you as possible, like which ideas that, you are challenging in light of it being the 4th of July holiday this coming weekend. We just want to hear what's on your mind. So I'm going to turn it over to Danielle.
Okay, thank you, Allison, for setting us up. So this is going to be mostly a conversation, but to get it started, as we were having this conversation about, everything that's going on in the country, the push for racial justice in a whole new way lately, and then we have this 4th of July holiday coming up. We started talking about identity. And so I found a couple of clips, like voices from the past across centuries, actually, that kind of gets at this idea. So I'm going to go ahead and share that, and that'll just help get our thoughts generated. And then we'll kind of have the conversation in a more personal way. And you'll have to tolerate me reading to you a little bit because I couldn't find a recording of one of my voices. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Is it letting you do it?
Yeah, it's letting me do it. Oh, here we go. Sometimes I can't immediately see what I want to share, but here we go. And I'm gonna see if I can expand that first. All right. Okay, here I go. Well, flag me down if you can't hear.
Let me tell you something. For the first time in my adult lifetime, I'm really proud of my country. And not just because Barack has done well, but because I think people are hungry for change.
And then our next one, try to stop this before it, there we go.
But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you, this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today?
Okay. And so if you, I think you got this in the blog post, but that was Samuel Jackson reading Frederick Douglass, and that was a speech in 1852. And his purpose for coming to the event was his work as an abolitionist. So they asked him to speak on the 4th of July, and then he had the very long speech, attacks the system of slavery. And then another portion of that speech, which wasn't captured by Samuel L's oration, I'm going to go ahead and read that because it's relevant to our conversation. So this, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? And then the last voice, and I wish I could have found a clip because I'm not going to sound as good as the original, but this is Malcolm X, an excerpt from his speech, The Ballot or the Bullet, and that was 1964. So you have Michelle Obama, 2008, you have Frederick Douglass, 1852, and then you have Malcolm X, 1964. So you get a sense of the long period of time in which people were articulating this, this conflict around identity, American identity. And so here we go with Malcolm X. Let's see. I mixed it up with some notes. Okay, and just to share a little context is that he had recently, people were interested in hearing him speak because he had recently separated from the Nation of Islam. But he came and he was clear that he wasn't going to talk about that, but he was going to talk about the vote. And that was partly a purpose of the visit, to get African Americans to vote. So his audience is African Americans. And he takes this time to talk about some of this conflict we're talking about today. I'm not a politician, not even a student of politics. In fact, I'm not a student of much of anything. I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, and I don't even consider myself an American. If you and I were Americans, there'd be no problem. And as long as you and I have been over here, we aren't Americans yet. Well, I am one who doesn't believe in deluding myself. I'm not gonna sit at your table and watch you eat with nothing on my plate and call myself a diner. Sitting at the table doesn't make you a diner unless you eat some of what's on that plate. Being here in America doesn't make you an American. Being born here in America doesn't make you an American. Why? If birth made you an American, you wouldn't need any legislation. You wouldn't need any amendments to the Constitution. You wouldn't be faced with civil rights filibustering in Washington, D.C. right now over the Civil Rights Act. No, I am not an American. I'm one of the 22 million Black people who are the victims of Americanism. One of the 22 million Black people who are the victims of democracy. Nothing but disguised hypocrisy. So I'm not standing here speaking to you as an American or a patriot or a flag saluter or a flag waver. No, not I. I'm speaking as a victim of this American system. And I see America through the eyes of the victim. I don't see any American dream. I see an American nightmare. I say again, I'm not anti-Democrat. I'm not anti-Republican. I'm not anti-anything. I'm just questioning their sincerity and some of the strategy that they've been using on our people by promising them promises that they don't intend to keep. When you keep the Democrats in power, you're keeping the Dixiecrats in power. A vote for a Democrat is a vote for a Dixiecrat. That's why in 1964, it's time now for you and me to become more politically mature and realize what the ballot is for, what we're supposed to get when we cast a ballot. And that if we don't cast a ballot, it's going to end up in a situation where we're going to have to cast a bullet. It's either a ballot or a bullet. And that's how the speech got its title. And so what was, you know, we had our conversation when we were thinking about this, and we're like, oh, we should have a better normal about this. And I was just struck as I started thinking about how long this question of American identity, Malcolm X says right out, I don't consider myself an American. And although she didn't say this directly, Michelle Obama kind of implied that when she said, well, she was really talking about her patriotism. So it's the first time she felt proud of my country. And it was, I don't know if everyone remembers, that was so controversial. That was a huge issue. And so many people were angry about it. And part of the reason that people will be angry about it, if they don't understand, in 2008, she's echoing the sentiments of the civil rights era and the even before the end of slavery, when you still had, even under the institution of slavery, you still had a lot of free African Americans, and they too questioned their identity as American. So this is a long conversation, and we're joining it here in 2020. So I will rest there. I know Allison, we talked about it, but I know she probably has it in front of her. We prepared some questions to get us generated, and I think we'll also let people just jump in. But go ahead, Allison.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. So I guess, yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about my own journey questioning the history that I was taught, because which inspired me to reach out to Danielle about doing this event today, because it just feels like the America that we were taught that exists we just didn't learn the real history. You know, for example, like in 8th grade, when we learn about US history, I can still remember it just over and over, our history teacher and the history book telling us that the Civil War was fought because of states' rights. Raise your hand, like, did anyone else, like, was that like the main thing that you learned as well? States' rights. It's just been such an interesting journey of unlearning. And so for me, a real entry point was that the fact that my grandfather grew up on a Native American reservation, Wind River in Wyoming. And my grandfather is white, but his adopted dad is a Native American. And so kind of a unique experience. But that was sort of my entry point to start asking more questions. I think we probably all have these moments where we thought, wait a minute, let me start asking more questions, because this is a side of, and I work in trauma, and this is a side of my family that has some very overt trauma, alcoholism and abuse. And so it was an interesting place to go, okay, let me start connecting the dots. Like, what does it mean? What does it mean to grow up as a human being on a Native American reservation in America? And what kind of childhood do you get to have or not get to have? And how does that influence the next generation and the next generation? And that starting place sparked, learning more and more. And the more and more I learned, the more horrified I became. This reservation is known for having a really high crime rate, really high poverty. And it feels like the story that I inherited growing up American is that if you're in poverty, or if there's high crime, there's something wrong with the people. There's just something wrong with them there, since they can't seem to get it together. Did anyone else inherit that story? about American identity. Yeah, if you can't get it together, it's your personal fault. You're not pulling yourself up by your bootstraps hard enough, and you need to try harder. And that just feels like so much of the American identity that I inherited. And I can still remember, like, even like bringing that mindset. My extended family is pretty conservative. They're from Montana. And I remember bringing that mindset into my Latin American studies class in college, and really thinking like, oh, well, like people need to take responsibility for themselves, and people should just have less kids, and all of these like really closed-minded, ignorant ideas that I really just inherited, like growing up in a pretty conservative family. And I remember my Latin American studies professor at Berkeley very kindly and patiently explaining to me that there are larger issues here. There's politics involved, there's power, there's money, and the reasons that people are poor are the direct result of very intentional policies that were created. But that's not the version of history that we get to learn in K through 12. And so the process of unlearning has been devastating because of all of the very violent ways that people have been marginalized in the United States, and how deeply ingrained that is in our history from the very foundations. And so it's really difficult for me to feel proud of our country or want to celebrate Independence Day when our country was really founded on the dehumanization of other human beings. So I just wanted to share that little piece of my journey. I went and visited the lynching memorial in Montgomery, Alabama 2 summers ago before starting grad school. And I just want to say that that was a very profound and moving experience. And if you all have the opportunity to visit, especially to my fellow white people, it's very important to go there and to really understand the pain and devastation. So please make that a bucket list item to go there and to really learn the real history. There's the memorial, and then there's a museum that tells the real history that we always should have had that we didn't get. And that was a profound thing for me, a profound visit. So let's start with the first question: who is an American? And I invite, you can raise your hand. I don't know how to do that on here. There's a way to do that. Does anyone want to share? Oh, participants menu.
Participants menu.
Does anyone want to answer the question, who is an American?
Or how do we know that someone is an American?
Anyone? Oh, how about Edna? So I just unmuted you, but I think you have to do something also on your end, Edna. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So very simply, to me, an American is e pluribus unum, out of many, one. It's what it should have been. And the one thing I'm proud of for our country right now is seeing people come together in mass and putting their bodies on the line during COVID, facing down racists, to say enough. We need to heal from this. This is past due, and we all need to go forward together with nobody left behind. That's.
Thank you so much, Edna. Thank you.
And Allison, the hand raising is working. Ian Nicholson raised his hand. There's like a little.
Okay.
Do I ask? I could click it. Ask to unmute.
Oh,
Done.
sure, yeah. Just wanted to help you out there. So, yeah, Yeah, I feel like the definition of who an American has really changed over time. Like it seems like there's always been a scapegoat group, an out group. You know, for people of color, it's always been the case. But you know, for Italians or for other immigrants that we would now consider to be white, the Irish, like there's always been a group that gets the blame. Like we don't want you here. Irish need not apply. And now we look back and a lot of these European immigrant groups are now considered to be part of the American identity. And it makes me wonder, is this the moment for people of color? I think time will tell. But I think who is an American, that's like, it seems like it's an always changing dynamic. So that's kind of my take on it.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And we have
Oh, Sissy.
Sissy, yeah. I'm getting the hang of this.
I don't have an answer, but I just wanted to share. I worked at the first time I thought of what does it mean to be an American, I was working at an adoption agency, and we were doing post-adoption cultural events for families. And we had them for 20 different countries if kids were born internationally and adopted into the United States. But we didn't have any events for kids that were adopted domestically. Like, what is your culture if you're born in this country? What does that mean? What is your culture and identity? And I think it's just like the first time I really thought about this question and struggling with the answer. That's all. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Sissy.
Deborah, do you want me to unmute you? I see that you have your hand raised.
Do it.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I think Malcolm X said best, because if we were Americans, we wouldn't have to fight for equal rights and justice. So, I don't know how you would describe who is an American, because you can be born here, but you still don't have the same rights as some people and some citizens. So it's described as we're supposed to be a melting pot. The Americas, that was what we were supposed to be. In our history, we were taught that this is a melting pot of different cultures and things like that. But for certain races, we look at it and we don't have the same rights as even some of those people who came over later. So it's very questionable about who's American.
Thank you so much, Deborah. So I think that answers our first two questions: who's an American and what does it mean to be American? And the third question is one that I had started to talk about my perspective. What are we having to unlearn about American identity and or history? So I kind of mentioned a couple for myself, like the bootstraps mentality. That's an identity, like an American identity. Like, I can do it by myself. I'm a lone cowboy. I don't need anyone. That's an identity that I've had to unlearn. And because it's not useful, it doesn't create a loving and peaceful society. And it's not true. And American history, I kind of touched on as well. We didn't really get the full picture at any point. So I invite you, you can either like type your answer into the chat, or you can say, I have an answer, or you can do the hand raising, the button, or you can wave at us. What about Natalie? And then Miriam. Where is Natalie? Okay, I'm gonna unmute you, Natalie. Oh, you got it. Okay, sorry. Okay. Huh, we can't hear you.
You might have to unmute yourself.
She's unmuted.
Oh.
Oh, phone isn't connected. We'll come back. We'll come back. So, Miriam.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I think, and somebody kind of alluded to this before in one of the comments about unlearning things. I think that there's so many things too that I don't know. So in order for me to be more supportive of students I work with, colleagues I work with, friends I have who are all different, I have to really go back and learn more about historical context. Like I was reading something about how slavery was taught in school and what we learned in our textbooks, and it was really, and I could relate to it because I kind of read these kinds of things about, it was almost like a very weak introduction into what slavery was, and then it talked about and some people that came had a better life, and this is not reality, but this is what was taught in school. And I asked my college-age children if they learned about slavery in school, and it seems like, again, very kind of bypassed, watered-down version. They knew of it, but just didn't really know the details. You know, and then I saw something on the Sunday morning show yesterday or the week before, and it was a whole history of how the police department started, how policing was originally began with groups of people who were trying to make sure that slaves didn't get, that they were listening or doing whatever they were supposed to be doing, and then it evolved. And then the Ku Klux Klan got involved, and then the police were always involved with any kind of civil rights things, always trying to hold people back. So I think there's all these things that I didn't really know about or weren't aware of, and I think that all of us have just so much to learn. Sorry, I'm rambling. Anyway.
Thank you so much, Miriam. No, that was great. There is a lot to learn and unlearn. There's a lot. Okay, so Natalie said that she's back. So I unmuted you. Oh, I don't know. Okay, there it goes.
Via phone, can you hear me? Okay, yay. Yeah, my comment was we are not the great democracy nor the great liberator of others that we thought we were. And I think that's in direct opposition to the culture we have of if you don't love your military, you don't love your country. And that is definitely, and you also see that echoed in, well, how can you be against the police force? You know, the police are almost they're a subset of the military, if you will, and you're not loyal to your country if you don't love the police and you don't love the military. And you've seen what's happened when we've gone into other countries with other cultures like the Middle East, and we've attempted to insert Americanized democracy, and we've watched it crumble and fall apart because we don't even have a good structure here. But then you go in and you don't understand a culture, you don't understand the way it was built, the interpretations of things, and I think we think we have the answer. We have been touting ourselves as the greatest country for XYZ things for years, but when you look at maternal mortality rates, when you look at education, when you look at incarceration, we're number one in a lot of negative things. And that's pretty much where I'm like, one of the things I would love to learn to do is how to uncouple or help people uncouple their wanting to support the military and being proud of serving the military and still being supportive of our brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, uncles, cousins, grandparents that fought in the military, not demeaning or diminishing their sacrifice, but at the same time saying, is that really the only thing that makes us loyal to our country, is being military minded no matter what the cost?
Wow, great points, Natalie. Danielle, do you have any any thoughts or responses?
Yeah, I have lots, and I'm organizing them in my notes so I give everybody else a chance to talk. But one thing is I'm hearing a lot people either have started to awaken or are awakening in the moment around the failure of our education system to teach us the truth. And so one, I'm not going to look for the quote, I probably could find it quickly, but there's an educator in Pittsburgh who recently, she's writing something longer, but she wrote how our calling as educators is to teach social justice and to be in service of liberation. I'm paraphrasing at this point, and to be in service of liberation. And if we're doing anything else in our role as educator, we are just reinforcing the existing power structure. And so I think education is a huge part of, like someone else mentioned, healing and getting us to that point of even wanting to go out in the streets and resist or change policy. We have to understand we have to understand the truth. We have to understand what we're dealing with. So, education is definitely a very good step. And I'll take this moment to promote our ACES Connection anti-racism resources, which I hope you've all seen, or if you're new to the site, Sissy, who's on the call and spoke earlier, helped pull that together. And it's a lot of those resources are educational, and that's something we have to do for ourselves because we didn't get it. I didn't get it in K through 12. And I happened to take Africana Studies and minored in it. And I took a bunch of classes and learned a whole lot of stuff. And I happened to take classes with a particular psychology teacher who taught more globally what America's presence, similar to what Allison said, what America's presence in the world has been. And that, because I happened to take those classes, I happened to get that education. But it's not, you're gonna miss it if it's not integrated into the curriculum anywhere. So we have to educate ourselves and also figure out ways that we can get past this education along, up to and including the point it does get in the curriculum. Because in California right now, we have two efforts. One, to make ethnic studies a high school requirement, and it's going stalled in the legislature right now. And then one where the CSU, our state university system, is also going to try to make ethnic studies a requirement. And there's a lot of resistance to that. A lot of people who do not want to see that. That's why the high school part is stalled. So anyway, I just make that, I'll leave it there at that observation. And then if there's time at the end, I have a couple of other things I'll share.
I'm loving that people are putting resources in the chat. Like, we love that and appreciate that. So if there's something that you've read or watched that you think has made an impact on you and you want to put that in the chat, like we would love to see that there. So I want to call on Nivedita. You had a couple comments just about very recent immigrants to the, I'm going to unmute you.
Yes, Allison.
Good to see you here.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. Yeah, so as I said, like, there are a lot of displaced immigrants, and I don't know why they are displaced, because they are, like, for instance, I work for the New York City, and the city has a lot of immigrants in their in the office, and all of them are like lawyers and doctors, and they're very good at work, but the only thing is that they're not fluent in English, and sometimes this displacement is a big deal for immigrants here. So I just wanted to mention that too.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up, I mean, we're a country of immigrants, and yet I mean, it just leads me to ask more questions. At what point does an immigrant get to be considered an American? I don't know, but it's a great question to think about. Okay, so our next question And I love this one. Danielle, do you remember talking about this one? Is that here at ACES Connection, I think out of any place I've ever worked, we do a really good job of holding space for how people feel. And so we were really, really glad to be able to ask this question. And we really want to know, how do you feel about being American? If you are American, how do you feel? And so you can either raise your hand or type your response and we'll call on you, either one of those. So let's call on Nakia, and please correct me if I'm saying your name incorrectly. So I'm unmuting you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. It's exhausting. Like I said, I mentioned earlier in the chat, I consider myself to be an American and Indigenous because I come from ancestors of slaves and Native Americans. So, you know, we built this country. So I don't even question that part of it. But as a Black woman, I'm exhausted because, you know, sometimes we can't exist on our own skin freely. You know, that's the part that we struggle with a lot of times. And we can't be angry. We can't be silly. We just can't be because it's always being questioned. So, you know, then it makes you feel like, you know, well, it makes you just want to stay in the house. You know, you're afraid to go out. You're afraid to just be in the space because you don't know what's going to happen. And, you know, as an American, you know, that just shouldn't happen, but it does. And a lot of people don't want to talk about their reality. A lot of people don't want to acknowledge that, you know, this is something that's been here since, you know, the colonists have arrived. So, and you know, it's never been addressed. It's starting to get, you know, people are dealing with that now, but it's just something that it didn't get here by accident, and it's going to take a lot of healing and conversation like this and people like you who are willing to be, you know, brave enough to do it to, you know, get to some type of solution. So it's exhausting.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's do Eleni, and then Ramona has your hand up. So I'm going to unmute Eleni. Did you? There we go.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Just embarrassed to be a white person, I think, to be honest, just because so many people are watching us. The fact that right now we're kind of, nobody wants us traveling. We're kind of like a joke around the world. And I come from, half of my family was of Jewish descent and persecuted. And it's kind of like, we haven't been able to learn from any of the past examples, and we're just now turning it around and doing it to other people. So yeah, that's really it.
Oh, thank you so much. Embarrassment is definitely one that I feel too.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's so great to be able to have these conversations in such an honest way, and with Nakia talking about the exhaustion, and then those are real. If we can't have the conversation in a real way, we won't get as far as if we can be completely honest. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing, everyone. And so Ramona Burton is waiting, and let me see.
I clicked on mute.
Oh.
So I think like you have to accept that. There we go.
Okay. Being an American, it makes you angry. Being a Black American makes you angry because no matter what your personal accomplishments are, they're never good enough. You can go to school, get a doctorate, and you're still looked upon as if you know nothing. And you can be an expert in your field. You can, as a race of people, we're always struggling to show or struggling to get approval for what we're doing because you're never appreciated. It's never, and it's sad that you have to have these you have to have these conversations with your children about, yeah, you need to go to school. And the reason why you need to get that education, because it doesn't matter if you're good at what you do, having the education. I said, they can take a job away from you, but they can never, ever take your personal accomplishments away from you. And it's yours, you have it, you can live with it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Ramona. There's a real pain to being in this, I hate to use this word, but it's not, I can't think of a better one. I first encountered it in anthropology, but liminal, the liminal space of like not really existing. So you're in this gap where you are, I think I wrote this, I know I said it to Allison in my intro to this, today's event, that I actually don't think of myself as American first. I think of myself as Black. And then I know that I am American because I have an American passport, and that comes with its own privilege that's denied to many. But so I can't deny that I have some access to Americanism, but my identity and the things that make me feel good about being a human are more linked to my identity as a Black person. So there's a lot of pain though also in being excluded, like being landless in a way. You don't have a land, so your identity is this moving, the moving culture of your identity, and some people aren't even tapped into that, and then there's really a loss there. But I'm taking up too much time because other people want to talk. So next we have Ian Nicholson. I'm gonna ask to unmute.
Sure. Yeah, my mother is Taiwanese, and she emigrated here in the 1980s. And when I've been abroad, if I'm not around family and I get asked, where are you from? I'll tell people I'm from California. Like, I won't say I'm from the United States because, like, I'm not proud to be an American. Like, I didn't grow up in the America that fought against fascism in the Second World War. Like, I grew up, with trumped up charges of weapons of mass destruction that we didn't find in Iraq. I live in an America where Donald Trump is president, and like that's not something to be proud of. So it's something that I feel very conflicted about. So
yeah, thank you for sharing that, Ian. I've lost a little track of who's next, if Jenna or Allison might know.
I just really appreciated Sissy's story, and so I'd love, Sissy, for you to share that.
Well, it's embarrassing, but I will definitely share it because, I think my daughter's Asian, I'm white, and I think I've failed so many times in understanding, even when I think I'm understanding. So it's just, when she was little, and I always used to tell the story as this really funny story that, when I went to China to adopt, and then when we would go to the Camman market here in Quincy, which is an Asian market, and we would go there all the time. When we get there, we pull in the parking lot, my daughter would exhale. And she would say, and so one time she said, I love it here because here everyone looks like me and you look different. And then she said, and sometimes I get so tired of Americans. And I, at the time, thought it was this like funny, cute story, but I was like, you're an American, and explaining adoption. And I just missed what she was saying more fully. So I just want to say I'm glad for this conversation, because even when I was doing things that I thought was trying to be aware about race, I still was missing so much. So that's all I wanted to say. And I want to listen. I really appreciate the sharing.
Thanks, Sissy. I'm kind of reading some of the responses. I really am wanting to still kind of maybe hear from a couple people about how you feel, just because we just don't talk enough about how we feel, I think, in our society. And so if you have a certain feeling of how it feels, how the American identity feels, or how you feel let me know.
And I'm seeing one, Deborah Bass wrote about when working at a shelter, and when there's the option to write biracial, they say put Black. And that's yet another issue too. And as we grapple with American identity, where I'm not going to get too much into it, but in Ian's first comment when he talked about, he was talking a little bit about what is it, it shifts, what it means to be American. And there's a whole deeper conversation we could have about why it shifts and how that's not really so random. But, you know, what does it do when you have you are bicultural or maybe even multicultural? So like through adoption, as Sissy was saying, or occupying a biracial identity, and what does that do to your Americanness? Does one identity have more Americanness, or do you not really exist in Americanness? So I'm glad that Deborah raised that, because that's an issue I've heard people talk about before. That, in fact, in college, yet again, I took this class where it was called Just Black. Well, no, the class wasn't called Just Black. It was a psychology class, and we watched a video called Just Black, and it was UC Berkeley students, and they were all they all had one Black parent and one parent that was not Black. So it was different races, and they talked about the pain of that, which was not something I had thought about before. Now maybe I was 20 years old when I watched that video, and just that struggle and being asked to reduce, because in this country you can't occupy, you have to pick one. You have to match the categories that have been presented to us, which are really so arbitrary. But anyway, so thank you, Deborah, for raising that point.
Okay, I want to hear from Tony, if you feel comfortable sharing. I did click unmute, and I think you have to accept it on your side. We still cannot hear you.
Oh, Tony's voice. Tony just wrote, I have a sore throat.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, but thank you for typing your comment. Okay, so Miriam and then Kailen. Miriam.
Hi, so I guess really is me as a white privileged woman, I feel sick when I hear all of this and unbelievably sad. So if I'm feeling like that, what are, what is somebody of color feeling? You know, if I'm feeling that way, this is their existence, their daily lives, having to that's a lot of work to try and just have to be. And it just makes me sick. So I don't know. I'm just trying to think about where we go from here. And I apologize, but I have to meet with a student at 4. So I'm going to leave you all, but thank you for this conversation.
Thanks so much for joining. Thank you for your comments, Miriam. Okay, and so we had Kailen, so I'm gonna unmute you.
Hi, I think we're still in the conversation of how we define like ourselves as an American. My phone's been cutting in and out, but I just wanted to say that being a biracial Black woman in the United States, I've really gotten like a two Americas kind of version. I was privileged enough to be able to grow up in a variety of places around California, but the two that stuck out to me the most was living in Fremont and also in East Palo Alto. East Palo Alto is a primarily like Black neighborhood. Fremont is primarily like white Asian. My father is Black. Like I would experience being pulled over as a young child in my father's truck because he was being profiled by the police department of that occupying city. And my mother, who has connections to law enforcement, being able to kind of do whatever she wanted, like when she was navigating her own life. And it's really been hard to try and figure out like where exactly I fit in like the American picture, because of the different experiences that like my family members had. And being biracial, it affected the way that my peers would treat me when I was younger. So it's really been hard for me to like navigate where exactly I fit in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Was there anyone waiting, Allison? Because I wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think we probably will just go just a couple minutes over, and we understand if you're not able to stay. Danielle, yeah, I'll turn it over to you. And we have, I mean, amazing comments in the chat, and thank you everyone. And then our final question, I'll just ask it, and then Danielle, you can do your comments. Our final question was, has celebrating Independence Day taken on any new meanings for you in light of recent racial injustice events? So Danielle.
Yeah, I'm gonna just say something really quick and then I'll stop talking so that other people can talk with our overtime. First, I wanna say, Kailen, I grew up in East Palo Alto. Lived there for the first 17 years of my life, and then a little bit as an adult. Now I'm in Sacramento. And when you stated about sometimes your peers not accepting you, I don't know in which environments, but I know I've also heard when I talked earlier about leaning on my Black identity for a sense of like joy and freedom from kind of the constraints of being in a second class status. I know that sometimes when you have a biracial identity, I can only know this from my perspective. It might also happen in other situations, like with different demographics, but I know sometimes Black people can be unaccepting of a biracial person or demand that they only consider their Black identity. So and that's the title of that video was Just Black, and that was one of the things that people raised. So it gets really complicated. The one thing that I just will throw out, and I'm really not going to say anything else, but I might write a blog post with some of my thoughts and reflections from today. But earlier, I don't know if she's still on the call, Charmaine threw out a resource around racial trauma. And I'm working on an assignment through a partner that ACES Connection works with to look at how the connection, racial trauma really, the connection between how racism impacts people and how that is an issue of your nervous system, things that we talk about here, and it has implications for managing ACEs and building resilience. So I'm working on an assignment to pull together some literature around that. So I will be looking back at Charmaine's resource. And I just want to point out, and I learned this through psychology, that there is, and people are naming it these days as we have the term protective factors, and this is what I'll write about more later, but culture is considered a protective factor. And as we just talked about, it can be complicated. So it doesn't take care of everything, but there's people who actually study culture as a protective factor. I was just recently, the work of, I think her name is Karina Walters, who studies this in relation to Native American identities and how the more, I've learned this 20 years ago in my psychology classes too, that the more, because of what America is, the more you're able to develop, if you're in a marginalized community, develop your identity around that community in a positive way. So like the Black Power movement had a purpose. There is some insulation against, it's not a solution, but it's, and we don't want to rest there because we want to really be free, but just to make sure people understand that people who are from marginalized communities are not out here just totally adrift, that our own cultures can wrap themselves around us and give us some of the healing that we need. And one of my favorite authors, Robin Kelly, who wrote a book called Freedom Dreams, talks about how resistance is our healing, which I love that concept. So just throw those things out there. I'll write about it more later and I want to hear more from everyone else.
Yeah, so I think that probably we'll just kind of start to wind down, and maybe that last question is something that you all can take with you and think about. I do want to call on Nakia, who has your hand raised, and then we'll kind of wrap up. So if you do have an answer to our final question about what does celebrating Independence Day mean to you, or does it have any new meanings, please feel free to share in the chat.
Hi, how are you guys doing? Love this discussion. I just wanted to speak to the, I can't pronounce her name, but she said it in the chat. I don't want to mess her name up about it's better to being Black than being an immigrant. And I don't want to compare whose experience is worse than theirs, but you have to understand that being here and then having, people that have been lynched and in their military uniforms for being, and they're just as patriotic as anybody. You can't really say that it's better to be Black than an immigrant, because we're like I said before, we were born here and we get treated like we're nothing sometimes. So try not to make those comparisons, because Black people that have been born here and who love this country can still be killed at the whim of a white person, a cop. You know what I mean? So we don't want to make those comparisons. I would just be careful about doing that, because somebody who comes from whose grandmother was almost lynched in the South because she defended herself from being spit on. You know what I mean? So we don't want to, we got to be careful with the language. Everybody has a story. Everybody, with the exception of the Indigenous people, have come here for whether they were brought or they were, came on their own. And we just got to be careful about that. So I would just put that out there about saying what's better than what.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nakia, for saying that. I appreciate that response. And I can see that there's a counter response, and these types of conversations, especially when if you're part of a group of people who is feeling a lot of pain, can get very heated. And we welcome different emotional experiences here in this space. Although we would encourage all of you to just open your hearts and minds and to the experiences of others, and just be here to listen. And I think oftentimes when we are making comparisons about who may be feeling more pain or less pain, is that is probably coming from a place of hurt. And so it's good to just recognize, especially if we're seeing someone else make an unfair comparison, or what we're viewing as being unfair, is to maybe ask, what is their pain trying to say right now? So I just want to say thank you all so much for engaging in this conversation and sharing and bringing your full, authentic, and vulnerable selves. And we appreciate your presence so much. And we appreciate you making time for this, to have this conversation. And obviously we think it's so important, but it's just wonderful to know that it's important to all of you. And so we hope that you will keep having these conversations with us over at ACES Connection at acesconnection.com. And we hope to see you again for other Better Normals. You'll be getting an email about those. So Danielle, I'll let you wrap up.
Okay. Only thing I will add to everything, echoing everything Allison just stated, please use ACES Connection as a resource. And the anti-racism resources list is, the first place we put it was on the African American communities page, so you can look for it there. But I think we have a shortcut called the widget that takes you directly to that resource list. It's been put other places, so you might have, if you're already spending time on our site, you may have seen it. But if you don't know where to look, it's definitely on the African American communities page, and definitely check it out. And we take requests too, because in this, as our last comment showed, that we want to make sure that list is as maximally inclusive as possible, and we don't know everything. So please make suggestions if you have great resources that we should add.
All right, thank you everyone, and we hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday, and hope to see you back here again soon for a Better Normal. The next one will be next Tuesday.
Bye, everyone.